I'm sorry I don't speak Turkish, so I hope the English will be okay. There's a PDF of the presentation you can follow later. My main question is, in 20 years, if we're here again, are the capabilities you have today, will they still be useful tomorrow? We'll be here as humans or as artificial intelligence? So that's my main question. Let's see if we can answer that together. When you present futures or the future to people, most people go to zero loop. Zero loop means what you're saying is difficult, I don't understand it, I'm not going to change. When you give them scientific data, they argue against you even more. It's called doubling down. When you work with corporations, with CEOs, they say, interesting, what do we do tomorrow? They want to what's called just do it, as the Nike ad. Now, just do it is important, but the rate of change is so quick, you may do the wrong thing. If you look at this slide, let's innovate, we're too busy. So what we try to do is avoid being Kodak. Kodak couldn't see the shift from actually human resources to artificial intelligence, and thus the joke we use in foresight is you've been Kodak, you were unable to adapt. So what we try to do is go to double loop learning, which is difficult for most people. It's learning about learning. It's asking, what don't I know, as opposed to what I do know. Now, the people who are best at double loop learning, they go to narrative. Narrative is the metaphor, the story underneath what you're saying. So most people that are passive, they accept a story about themselves instead of being active, let me play a role in the future. So let me give you an example of that. This one large energy company, they asked for information about the future. They paid for it. Once they received it, they had me present. Then they asked, can you please stay for the board meeting? I said, sure. As the board meeting started, they did business as usual. And I fell asleep in the meeting. And the chairman of the board said, you shouldn't be sleeping, we're paying you to stay awake. And I said, yeah, but you're still doing the same thing. You pay for information about the future, but you don't make the change. Why is that? We found out it's their narrative. Their narrative was Queen Elizabeth, a large ship that can't change. So it doesn't matter what you tell them, it's such a large ship, they believe they have a monopoly, they're number one, they don't change. They can thus be Kodak. So we said, what's a better story? The story we came up with was patrol boats. Patrol boat 1 is smart meters in every home. Patrol boat 2 is, instead of consuming energy, every home in 10 years is an energy producer. Patrol boat 3 was, how do we get citizens to start to trade and share information? So from Queen Elizabeth, very difficult to change, we went to patrol boats, possibility of change. So the idea is we want to do narrative foresight, stories about the future. Now when you do this work, again, it's difficult because our brains are wired to not understand the future. When you do MRI scans and you show novelty, people look to their memories to understand the future. So the natural response to exponential change is, I'm going to think about the past to think about the future. So we're unable to see novelty, we're unable to innovate, even if you have a Ministry of Innovation. They're the exact people who can't innovate. So the hypothesis there, how will human resources change given that we've entered galloping time? There's normal time is stable, galloping time is a very fast horse. Now the good thing about galloping time, your influence is exponential. You have high impact, high influence. The bad thing is one mistake, you fall down very quickly. The leaders of today are the losers of tomorrow. So that's fantastic if you want a different world. It's horrible if you want the same world. The European Commission a few years ago said, can you help us think about the future of the university? So there was 150 vice chancellors. When we talked about the university of the future, the European vice chancellor said, we don't need to learn. We've been doing this for 1,000 years. The Asian vice chancellor said, aha, we don't have to follow the Harvard model. We can do something else. So you can impact us higher. But is there a structured way to think about the future? The methodology we use is emerging issues analysis, the S-curve. Most people live in problems. Deloitte, McKinsey, Tata, they live in trends. We live at the bottom. Those are high-impact, unknown events, black swans, weak signals that change the game. Now, what are some of those? One is repricing of nature. Because of climate change, nature is getting more expensive. Thus, someone has invented what's called pure meat. The first burger costs $350,000 US for one burger. It's dropped to $16. Memphis meat will drop it to $1. So the entire supply chain of agriculture will be disrupted. You won't need cows, sheep, anything anymore. No antibiotics, it's safer, and the profits will go to the innovation companies. When I present to this Ministry of Agriculture in one country, I said, what should be your response? Your entire supply chain is about to be destroyed. They said, kill the vegetarians. I said, well, that's not innovative. What's your next response? They said, kill the scientists. I said, so those two won't help you. You have to do something else. So this is the notion of pure meat, super meat. When I presented this 10 years ago, crazy idea, a week ago, Branson and Gates have put money in the project. They also want to disrupt supply chain. The second big shift for HR is the rise of artificial intelligence. The Internet of Things, big data, and most importantly, blockchain, distributed, transparent information. Now, what it really does, it does the things we don't want to do. I was at a conference like this. At lunchtime, the organizer said, please sell your books. I said, no, I want to have lunch. They said, not a problem. Our robot will sell your books for you. So I went and had lunch. I came back. That little robot had sold 3 books, and he didn't charge commission. So he does the things we don't want to do. Now, what happens to humans? If in 20 years, 80% of you are replaced by artificial intelligence? One, we imagine, we create the dream economy. We challenge assumptions. We do something else. And most importantly, we go from IQ to emotional intelligence to spiritual intelligence, which is knowing how to be present, how to breathe, and how to think dramatically different. My wife, she hates computers. She spends her day fighting with Windows, fighting with her iPhone. That's all she does. In the future, the big skill set is how well do you get along with your robot? Is your emotional intelligence high enough that you and your robot are friends? That's how you hire people. How good are they in playing with technology? Now, you may think I'm crazy. I wrote an article 40 years ago that robots will have human rights. This was for the American justice system in 1984. It was a crazy idea. Then, a week ago, the Saudi government gave a robot citizenship. It now has legal rights. Wisconsin, for the HR department, has put every employee has a biochip. So it does everything by the chip. In one law firm, they've eliminated on the board is a robot, and now they can take 360,000 hours of lawyer hours in a few seconds. Now, again, you may think I'm silly. In Barcelona, it's the first robot brothel. And if you've been to Barcelona, everyone loves to protest there. The normal sex workers, they had a protest and said, they're taking us out of business, so the mayor of Barcelona had to move the robot brothel outskirts. Vienna now has 2 robot brothels. The notion is to disrupt the entire sex industry in 10 years so you don't have prostitutes anymore. I work closely with international police, Interpol, etc. And they said, this is great. This will disrupt sex trafficking. You won't have humans. You'll just have robots. If you feel guilty after going to a robot brothel, you can always go to a robot priest. Now, the dangerous part for those of us in Asia who are riding the manufacturing upward cycle, linear event, is as the companies move back home, ILO says 90% of all workers in Southeast Asia will be unemployed. So what happens to the future of work as we do this? The third big change is peer-to-peer. This disrupts the middleman. You don't need banks. Kiva lends money to you. You don't need HR. It's direct through LinkedIn or something else. HR disappears. It goes from Britannica to Wikipedia, hierarchy to flatter. For example, GE wanted to redesign their airplane. They did global outsourcing. A 21-year-old student from Indonesia went to his local library with a 3D printer. He designed the part for the airplane. 8 billion people are now your employees, not the ones in your company. The entire world is now your employee. Now, of course, you still need experts. These pilots have lost touch with the airplane. Let's fly it together. That's crazy. When I'm on Turkish Airlines tonight, I want the pilot to fly it. But it does say capitalism is inefficient. Uberification, Airbnb will make things more efficient, but the employees don't get the money. So what would a cooperative platform look like? You don't need the big companies. Everyone creates wealth through having a new platform. Corbyn, the labor leader in Britain, says we need to go from the gig economy to the cooperative economy. Now, is this true in practice? Here's the trends, the waves of change we're seeing. What happens in the real world? So with one group we've been working with, a federal police, they said, right now we're hierarchy-based. How many years have you been in the force? We want to move to capability-based. So if one of you has a skill set, for 1 week you become a commissioner. For 1 week you become a detective. Everyone is now included, from hierarchy to capability. It's a very different way of running an organization. Another group in Africa, when I showed them data, solar is cheaper than coal now. Solar is cheaper than coal. What do? They said, well, in 5 years, we're bankrupt. So they had to think through, what do we do differently? Their conclusion was, every home produces energy, every African village has a battery. What happens to HR? Our skill set as engineers will disappear. We don't know the skill sets to create cooperatives. We don't have the skill sets to create a new energy scheme for Africa. So the changes are set that you won't survive the future. So we do scenarios. What might the future look like? We were working with libraries. People said the libraries will disappear. What's option one? Direct brain download, Holocene. Now Facebook has bought that technology, Oculus Rift. Scenario two is, well, it's not about technology, it's placemaking. Let's make the library a beautiful place to be. Let's connect there, let's work together there, workshops for the aged, workshops on human resources. So the library becomes not AI, but a special place. Do you have the skill set for that? Most of the librarians said no. Third group said no, the library is about publishing. We've always been passive, let's become active. We just collect books, let's publish books. And the fourth group said if we do nothing, librarians by 2025 disappear. So what do? We ran workshops for librarians, and half of them were in tears. They said, I cannot move to the new future. My story is the library as the collection. Their new story was library as the innovator of the gardens. We will innovate in the new future. We'll do something different. So then, of course, HR has to shift to supporting the new librarian. So again, the conclusion is we're in galloping time. You don't need to think about the next 20 years if tomorrow is like today. If you've seen growth rates in Turkey, you've seen dramatic shift in 20 years, in the last 30 years. Things are not stable. The hypothesis there, this exponential change will keep on going. Now, what should you do? One is think about the future deeply. Two is you slow down to speed up. As technology gets faster, humans slow down. So technologies like meditation, They slow the breathing. We know they make you live longer. They reduce diseases. And most importantly, for hospitals, your hospital costs drop because people who meditate, who do alternatives, they have a far fewer chance of getting sick. As the future goes quicker, think about the alternatives, do double loop learning, and slow down. Now you may say this is too difficult for me. I've been trained in one way. I can't think about the future. The idea here is, well, it may seem impossible, but as we learned from Nelson Mandela, it always seems impossible until you actually do it. I hope you're successful and your meeting 20 years from now is equally successful. Thank you very much.